Section 11 of Abe and Mawruss. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Abe and Mawruss. Being Further Adventures of Potash and Perlmutter by Montague Glass. Section 11. Chapter 7, Part 2. Brothers All. It lacked 1 minute of 5, and Abe and Mawruss sat in their respective desks in the firm's office, when Miss Cohen, the bookkeeper, knocked timidly at the door. "A gentleman wants to see you, Mr. Potash," she said. "He wouldn't give his name." Abe cleared his throat with an effort. "Tell him he should come right in," he croaked, and a moment later a tall personage, clad in a fur overcoat and wearing a freshly ironed silk hat, appeared in the doorway. "Is this Mr. Potash?" he asked in rounded, oratorical tones. Abe nodded. For a moment he was bereft of speech, and he jerked his head sideways in the direction of his partner. "This is Mr. Perlmutter," he said at length, "my partner." "How do you do, sir?" the visitor replied, as he seized Morris's clammy palm in a warm embrace. "Take a seat," Morris murmured, dragging forth a chair, and the stranger sat down deliberately. "Well, sir," Abe asked, "what can we do for you?" "Mr. Potash," the visitor began, "every merchant is at times confronted with a situation which demands a few appropriate remarks." Abe nodded and mopped tentatively at his dewy forehead. "But how many are there," the visitor continued, "who can do justice to the occasion? For instance, Mr. Perlmutter, you are asked at a charitable meeting to discuss the question of restricting immigration. I ask you candidly, Mr. Perlmutter, would you feel competent to stand upon your feet and—" Suddenly Abe jumped to his feet. "Excuse me, my dear sir," he cried. "Wouldn't you smoke a cigar?" Morris was nearest the safe, and he too leaped from his chair. "Never mind the safe, Morris," Abe said, flapping his right hand excitedly. "I bought some while I was out just now." He handed a gold-banded, Bismarck size cigar to the visitor, who nodded a dignified acknowledgment and immediately struck a match. "Yes, Mr. Perlmutter," he went on, "as I was saying, such a topic as the restriction of immigration would embarrass even an experienced speaker." He paused and cleared his throat impressively. "Now I have here," he said, exploring the capacious pockets of his overcoat, "a work entitled 'A Quarter of a Century in Congress,' by the Honorable Lucius J. Howell, which, gentlemen, is issued upon subscription only, in half Morocco or crushed Levant, at a hitherto unheard of price." Abe ceased mopping his brow and turned a terrible glare upon the book canvasser. "What?" he roared. "A book agent?" Once more he jumped to his feet. "Out!" he bellowed. "Out from my office, you dirty loafer!" The book agent scowled and replaced the bound dummy in his pocket. "With a high-grade selling proposition like this, Mr. Potash," he said, "you should be careful of your language." "Morris!" Abe cried. "What the devil do you mean letting in a fellow like this?" "What do you mean, letting him in?" Morris retorted. "Did I tell Miss Cohen she should show him in?" "Don't quarrel on my account, gentlemen," the canvasser said as he puffed at his cigar. "I shall call again when you're not busy." He passed out of the office with a graceful gesture of farewell, and once more Abe and Mawruss sat down on the edge of their chairs. It was not for long, however. At this time, without any announcement, a thick-set gentleman with carefully trimmed beard and mustache stood in the doorway. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said, and Abe and Mawruss literally sprang into the middle of the office floor. "Mr. Steuermann!" Abe gasped, extending his hand. "My name is Mr. Goldstein," the visitor replied, "and I represent the Lily White Dress Shield Company." He proceeded no further, however, for Morris led him by the shoulder to the elevator shaft and pointed to a notice reading "Hours for Salesmen, 8 to 9:30." Morris returned to the office, and hardly was he seated in his chair when, for the third time, the doorway framed a visitor. "Mr. Potash?" the newcomer asked timidly. He was a short, slender man, past middle age, clad in a shabby overcoat, half threadbare, and a soft felt hat of a dingy, weather-beaten appearance. "No," Abe growled. "What is it now?" "Mr. Potash," the stranger continued, "I called to see you at the request of Mr. Geigerman. My name is Steuermann." Abe essayed to rise, but his knees would not support him, and he waved his hand feebly to a chair that Morris dragged forward. "Mr. Steuermann," Morris said, "you're coming up here to see us when we could much better afford it if we would go down to see you?" "Why, gentlemen, it was no inconvenience for me," Steuermann replied. "I am on my way home." "God would bless you for it anyway," Abe declared fervently, and Steuermann blushed. "Now, Mr. Potash," he protested, "I am not here for compliments. I've come to see what we can all do for this poor fellow. I'm a little late because I was waiting for a report from my lawyers." "Your lawyers!" Abe exclaimed. "Why, we already hired Henry D. Feldman." "So I believe," Steuermann replied, "and he was consented to act in conjunction with my lawyers, Chitty, Schwartzstein and Munjoy. I shall relieve you gentlemen of all responsibility in that matter." "Do you mean by responsibility, Mr. Steuermann, that you would pay Feldman?" Abe asked. Mr. Steuermann smiled. "Well, we won't discuss that just now," he said. "Because," Abe continued, "we wouldn't consent to nothing of the kind, Mr. Steuermann. The young fellow works for us, and we got to do our share." "That part will come later," Steuermann insisted. "And now let's see what's to be done." For more than a half an hour Steuermann disclosed to Abe and Mawruss the result of his lawyer's investigation. "Mr. Munjoy has seen Kovalenko," Steuermann said, "and he asserts that, so far as proof is concerned, no murder was ever committed." "But, Mr. Steuermann," Morris said, "the fellow which he opened the package, you understand, was blown up so his own father couldn't recognize him even." "That's just the point, Mr. Perlmutter," Steuermann declared, "and Mr. Munjoy says that on this circumstance hinges the Russian consulate's whole case. They are obliged to prove that a definite person was killed, and it seems that the consulate paid the passage of the victim's father to this country so that he might testify before the United States Commissioner. I understand that the old man, who, by the way, is rabbi, arrived last week. Mr. Munjoy says that if the father is unable to testify to the identity of the victim, it may so complicate matters that more evidence will be necessary, and the consulate may drop the affair on account of the expense involved." Morris nodded sadly. "Lawyers could always make expenses, Mr. Steuermann," he said, "for the Russian consular and for us also." "Never mind about expense, Morris," Abe interrupted. "What does it matter a few $100, Morris, so long as we get this young fellow free? In fact, Mr. Steuermann, I'm willing we should go half. If we could see this here rabbi and schmear him $1,000, he should swear that no one was killed at all." Mr. Steuermann shook his head. "That would be, in effect, suborning perjury, Mr. Potash," he said, and Morris glared at Abe. "I'm surprised at you should suggest such a thing, Abe," he exclaimed. "Seemingly you got no conscience at all. $1,000 we should pay the fellow. I bet you he would lie himself black in the face of a $20 bill." "It isn't a matter of money, Mr. Perlmutter," Steuermann said. "But why not see the old man tonight? I have his address here, and if you approached him in the right way, perhaps he might testify that he did not recognize the murdered man. That would only be the simple truth, and it would be just what we want. As it is, I'm afraid the Russian consulate will intimidate him into swearing that he knew the body to be that of his son." He handed Morris a card bearing a Madison Street address. "Well, gentlemen," he concluded, "I've taken up your time long enough. I hope to see you in my office tomorrow, Mr. Perlmutter." Morris nodded and was about to shake hands with his visitor when Abe slapped his thigh in a sudden realization of his inhospitality. "Mr. Steuermann," he exclaimed, "wouldn't you smoke something?" He jumped to his feet and thrust a huge gold-banded cigar at Mr. Steuermann, who shook his head. "Thank you very much," Mr. Steuermann said, "but I'm afraid it's rather near dinner time." "Put it in your pocket and smoke it after dinner," Abe insisted, and Mr. Steuermann smilingly obliged. Together the two partners escorted him into the elevator, and when the door closed behind him, Morris turned to Abe with an ironical smile. "You got a whole lot of manners, Abe, I must say," he commented bitterly. "What do you mean, manners?" Abe asked. "What had I done?" "Tell a millionaire like Mr. Steuermann he should smoke the cigar after dinner," Morris replied. "Don't you suppose he's got plenty cigars of his own?" "Maybe he did got 'em, and maybe he didn't," Abe retorted. "But in the first place, Morris, I noticed he took the cigar, you understand? And in the second place, Morris, them cigars cost 35 cents apiece, Morris, and there's few millionaires, Morris, which is too proud to smoke a 35-cent cigar." When Morris Perlmutter entered the subway that evening, en route for the Lower East Side, he was in none too cheerful mood, for in the excitement attending Steuermann's visit, he had forgotten to telephone Mrs. Perlmutter that he would be late for dinner. Consequently, there had been a painful scene upon his arrival home that evening, nor had Mrs. Perlmutter's wrath been appeased when he informed her that he was obliged to go right downtown again. Indeed, his sympathy for Caesar Kovalenko had well nigh evaporated as he entered the subway, and he reflected bitterly upon the circumstance that first led him to hire that unfortunate young man. Thus there was something doubly irritating in the coincidence which seated him next to Louis Kleinman in the crowded express train he had boarded, and he made up his mind to ignore his competitor's presence when Louis caught sight of him. "So, Perlmutter," Louis commented without any introductory greeting, "you trying to do us again?" Morris turned and stared icily at Kleinman. "I don't want to talk to you at all, Kleinman," he replied. "And anyhow, Kleinman, I don't know what you mean. We're trying to do you? The shoe pinches on the other foot, Kleinman. Will you just stop to consider you're stealing away from us that fella Harkavy, which all he knows we taught him." Louis Kleinman emitted a short, raucous guffaw. "Well, what are you kicking about?" he said. "You stole him back again, ain't it?" "Stole him back again?" Morris repeated. "What are you talking nonsense, Kleinman? We wouldn't take that fella back in our store. Not if we can get him to come to work for $2 a week." "Yeah," Kleinman exclaimed skeptically. "I don't suppose you know the fella left us at all." "I did not," Morris replied promptly. "And if he did, Kleinman, I couldn't blame him. The fellow doesn't want to work all his life for $10 a week." "What do you mean $10 a week? We paid Harkavy $15, and we offered him $25, but the fellow wouldn't stay with us at all. For 2 weeks now he's acts uneasy, and yesterday he leaves us." "That's all right, Kleinman," Morris said as the train drew into 96th Street. "You could easily steal somebody else from another concern." Kleinman glared at Morris and was about to utter a particularly incisive retort when the train stopped. "I got to change here," he announced. "But when I see you again, Perlmutter, I'll tell you what you are." "I don't got to tell you what you are, Kleinman," Morris concluded as he opened his evening paper. "You know only too well." "Rusher," Kleinman hissed, as he hurled himself into the mob of passengers that blocked the exit. Morris nodded sardonically and commenced to read his paper. He desisted immediately, however, when his eye fell upon a cut accompanying Felix Geigerman's display advertisement. It was a beaded marquisette costume made in obvious imitation of one of Potash and Perlmutter's leaders, and the retail price quoted by Geigerman was precisely $1 less than Potash and Perlmutter's lowest wholesale figure. That's some of Harkavy's work. Morris muttered, and for the remainder of the journey he was once more plunged in the gloomiest cogitation. Almost automatically, he alighted at the Brooklyn Bridge and boarded a Madison Street car. And it was not until the jolting, old-fashioned vehicle had nearly reached its eastern terminus than he discerned the house number furnished to him by Steuermann. He hurried to the platform and jumped to the street, where he collided violently with a short-bearded person. "Excuse me," Morris cried, and then he recognized his victim. "Harkavy!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "I am coming to say goodbye to friend," Harkavy replied, with some show of confusion. "I got to go to Chicago tomorrow." "Chicago?" Morris repeated. "Why, what do you do in Chicago, Harkavy?" "I am now going to got a job out there," Harkavy replied. "A very good job." Morris drew his former assistant cutter to the sidewalk. He had temporarily forgotten the object of his visit to the Lower East Side in the sudden conception of an idea, which was no less than the rehiring of Harkavy. "What for a good job?" Morris asked. "$20 a week?" Harkavy nodded. "A little more," he said. "25." "Schon gut," Morris declared. "Then you wouldn't got to go at all, because we ourselves would give you 30. "I must go," Harkavy said, shaking his head. "My fare paid." "Pay him back the fare," Morris insisted. "We would see you wouldn't lose it." Again Harkavy shook his head. "I got bonus, too," he declared. 1,000 rubles. "What are you talking about, rubles?" Morris said impatiently. "You ain't a greenhorn no longer. Do you mean $1,000? $600 about," Harkavy replied. Morris whistled. "Well," he said after a pause of some seconds, "put off going until tomorrow anyhow. Maybe we can fix you up to give you the $600 anyhow." Harkavy remained silent, and Morris clapped him on the shoulder. "If people are so anxious to get you that they pay you a big lot of money like that, Harkavy, you could keep 'em waiting anyhow one day. Come round and see us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, wouldn't you?" Harkavy pondered the question for some minutes. "If you wish it, Mr. Perlmutter," he said, "but I must got to go away by 11 o'clock sure." "Good!" Morris exclaimed. "Then I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock." They shook hands on the appointment, and Morris turned away and ascended the high stoop of an old-fashioned tenement. In the vestibule he encountered a boy whose right cheek was apparently distorted by a severe toothache. "Do a family by the name Levin live here?" Morris asked. The boy nodded and disgorged a huge lump of toffee, whereat the toothache disappeared. "That's me father," he said. "4th floor, front east. He ain't in, though." "Your father?" Morris cried. "Why, the people I'm coming to see, they're greenhorns." "Oh, yeah," the youngster replied. "That's me father's uncle. He lives with us." "All right," Morris said. "Take me up there." The youngster resumed his swollen cheek and escorted Morris up 3 flights of slippery, brass-bound stairs. Without the formality of knocking, they entered an apartment on the 4th floor where a woman stood washing dishes. "Mrs. Levin," Morris said. The woman nodded. "I want to see your man's uncle," Morris continued. Without looking up, the woman cried in stentorian tones, "Meester!" In response, a bent figure, clad in an alpaca kaftan, appeared from an interior bedroom. He wore a velvet skull cap, and a thin gray beard straggled from his chin. His nose was surmounted by a pair of steel spectacles. "Shalom Aleichem," Morris cried. According the rabbi, that greeting, as ancient as the Hebrew tongue itself, "Peace be with you." "Aleichem shalom," the rabbi answered, and then he resorted to the Yiddish jargon, Do you look for me?" "I look for the Rav Elkin Levin," Morris said, in a tongue to which he had long been unaccustomed. "I am the servant of the philanthropist Steuermann." "Steuermann?" the Rav Levin repeated. "I do not know him." "In America," Morris said, "his name is honored over the governors. He sends me to you to speak for the unfortunate Zvi Kovalenko." "Zvi Kovalenko!" the old man cried, and his beard stood out as his invisible lips tightened, while his nose became sharp and hawk-like. "A Mishnah B'Shuna to him, the same as he sent to my son." "No," Morris declared. "He did not send it to your son. It was another that did it." The old man sank trembling into a nearby chair and clutched the edge of the table. "You tell this to me, who I saw with my own eyes his body?" he said in shaking tones. "Yes, Baron, I saw my own child like a slaughtered beast, all blood, not a face, but a piece of flesh. I saw him, and you tell me this?" "None the less," Morris went on, "if your son did die, it was a kapora not meant for him. It was intended for the chief of police." The Rav shook his head. "It stands in the Gemara," he said in the sing-song tone of a Talmudic reader. "If one flings a stone for pleasure, and it strikes another so that he dies, the one also shall die." He rose to his feet and waved one hand with a flapping motion. "An eye for an eye!" he cried in shrill tones. "A tooth for a tooth!" Morris shrank back and turned to the woman who had not raised her head from the dishwashing. "You tell him," he said, "that the philanthropist Steuermann invites him to come to the address I shall give you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Tell him you know that when Steuermann commands, governors obey." "What's it my business?" Mrs. Levin replied. "Tell him yourself." "Your man should go with him," Morris insisted. "He and you will not lose by it." Morris wrote the address on the back of one of Potash and Perlmutter's business cards and handed it to her. "Put it on the table," she said. "Tell your man," Morris continued, "if he does take this old man to Steuermann, I myself will pay him $25. Once more he faced the Rav, who had sunk again into the chair. "Will it bring back your son to you if Zvi Kovalenko dies?" he asked. The old man plucked at his beard. "He was my son, my only son," he said. "My Kaddish, a good son he was." Mrs. Levin, still at her dishwashing, raised her head and snorted impatiently. "Yeah, a good son," she commented in English. "A dirty, low-life bum he was. If he wouldn't be that he gonvered a couple of bottles wine from the store, he wouldn't have been in the police office at all. He brought it on himself, mister, believe me." Morris nodded. "What is vorbei is vorbei," he said. "Tell your man he should bring his uncle to Steuermann, and I would pay him short $25 cash." He bowed to the Rav, and with a final Shalom Aleichem passed downstairs to the street. As he waited at the corner for a westbound car, he thought he discerned a familiar figure in the shadow of the house he had just quitted. He walked slowly up the block, and Harkavy stole out of the basement area and slunk hurriedly past him. "Harkavy!" Morris called, but the assistant cutter only hastened his steps, and it seemed to Morris that a sound like a sob was borne backward. "What's the trouble, Harkavy?" Morris cried, but in response Harkavy broke into a run, and with a mystified shake of his head, Morris commenced his tedious journey uptown. When Morris, in company with his partner, entered the showroom at 8 o'clock the following morning, he had already enumerated to Abe the events of the preceding evening, not omitting his encounter with Harkavy. "I bet you he be waiting for us, Morris," Abe said, "and if I ain't mistaken, here he is now." Their visitor, however, proved to be a stranger who bore only a slight resemblance to their former cutter. "Mr. Perlmutter," he said, "ain't it?" "My name is Mr. Perlmutter," Morris said. "What do you want from us?" For answer, the visitor drew from his pocket a card and handed it to Morris. "Me, I am Pincus Levin, and you are leaving this by my wife last night," he said. "So I am coming to tell you I am agreeable to take Mr. Levin to Steuermann's place." All right, Morris replied. You can go ahead. Pincus Levin shoveled his feet uneasily, but made no attempt to depart. Well, Morris cried. Sure, I know, Pincus said. But if I would take Mr. Levin to Steuermann, you understand, and then maybe, I'm only saying, Mr. Perlmutter, you might forget the other part, ain't it? You mean you want your $25 in advance? Morris asked. Why not? Pincus replied. If I wouldn't take Mr. Levin today yet to this here Steuermann's office, Mr. Perlmutter, you can stop the check. Abe shrugged his shoulders expressively. An idea, he cried. You ain't never seen this fella before, Morris, ain't it? Morris admitted it. Well, then what's the use talking? Abe continued. How do we know he's this here Levin's nephew? Why, Mr. Potash, Levin cried. I ain't no crook. I got the old man in a coffee house around the corner right now. Bring him up here, then, Abe said, and we'll give you your money. Pincus Levin nodded and shuffled off toward the back stairs, while Abe turned and gazed after him. I couldn't make it out at all, Morris, he said. The more I look at that fella, Morris, the more he makes me think of this here. Good morning, Mr. Potash, a familiar voice interrupted. It was Harkavy. Hello there, Morris cried cheerfully. I thought you'd be here. Harkavy smiled sadly. His face was white and drawn, and his shoes and trousers were covered with mud, as though he had walked the streets all night. I am keeping my word anyhow, he said, but I am only coming to tell you I got to go to Chicago. Why must you gotta go? Abe insisted. Well, certain reasons, Mr. Potash, Harkavy replied. Certain... He struggled to control his speech as his eyes rested on the rear stairway. But his words became more and more inarticulate until, with a shudder and a gasp, he fell heavily to the floor. Oi, Gewalt! Abe exclaimed. He rushed to the office for a glass of water, but even before he had reached the cooler, he stopped suddenly. A great wailing cry came from the showroom, and when he ran back with the water, a bearded old man lay prostrate across Harkavy's body. Only Miss Cohen, the bookkeeper, kept a clear head during the confusion that followed. She dispatched Nathan, the shipping clerk, for a doctor, and directed her frightened employers to loosen the shirt bands of the unconscious man. Some whiskey, Morris shouted, and one of the cutters produced it bashfully from his hip pocket. Never try to force whiskey on a fainting person, Miss Cohen cried. It might get into their lungs and suffocate him. I wasn't going to, Morris said hastily as he took a yeoman's pull at the bottle. I'm feeling faint myself. Mir auch, Abe said, taking the bottle from his partner's grasp. After a refreshing draught, he passed it on to Pincus, who returned it empty to the crestfallen cutter, just as a physician dashed out of the elevator. What caused this trouble? He asked Abe, as he knelt down by the side of Harkavy. Abe looked helplessly at Morris and turned to Pincus Levin, who commenced to tremble violently. Hold on there, Morris shouted. He's going to faint too. Abe seized the glass of ice water and flung its contents into Pincus Levin's face. He gasped and sat down suddenly. The old man, he murmured. He's Yossel's father. Yossel who? Morris shouted. The old man's only got one son, and he's dead. Yes, I know, Pincus answered. He is, and he ain't. I always thought so too, Mr. Perlmutter, but this fella here is Yossel Levin, which he got blown up in Harkavy 2 years ago. What do you mean got blown up? Abe asked, as the doctor worked steadily over the two prostrate men. How could he be blown up if he's here now? Pincus shrugged his shoulders. How should I know? He said weakly. I ain't lying to you. This fella here is Yossel Levin, and my uncle there is his father. Do you mean to tell me that the old man's son ain't dead at all? Morris demanded. Seemingly, Pincus said. But this is the first time I heard it, and I guess it's the first time the old man heard it too. Harkavy moaned and tried to sit up. Easy there, the doctor commanded. Two of you take him inside and put him on a lounge if you have one." Abe and Morris followed Pincus and the head cutter as they supported the half-unconscious Harkavy into the firm's office. 10 minutes later the old man was restored to consciousness. "Wo ist er?" he murmured. "Mein Kind." "It's all right," the doctor replied. Then he turned to the office. "Come out here, you, and talk to the old man." Pincus came running from the office and reassured his uncle, who, under the ministrations of the doctor, grew rapidly stronger until he was sufficiently recovered to be placed on a chair. "Keep him quiet while I attend to the other fellow," said the doctor, "and don't let him talk." He went at once to the office where Harkavy sat on the edge of the lounge. "Here, what are you doing?" he cried. "You shouldn't let that fellow do any talking." "That's all right, doctor," Abe said calmly. "He should go on talking now if it would kill him even. Go ahead, Harkavy." "And so," Harkavy continued, "after I am stealing wine, they took me to police office. There was a place. But anyhow, Mr. Potash, I could tell you all about afterward. Inside backyard was dead moujik, which he's got run over by train. His face all damaged. You couldn't tell who he was at all." He faltered and waved his hand. "Give me, please, glass of water," he said, and the doctor seized his hand. "Never mind," Abe cried inexorably. "Leave him alone, doctor. He should finish what he's got to say." Harkavy nodded and sipped some water. "Then comes package for chief of police, and they put first in pail of water. Then they open, Mr. Potash, and it don't have nobody. But them Roches want to put it onto somebody, so they make me proposition they would give me couple $100 rubles and a ticket to America. And I took 'em up. For stealing that wine, I could get 5 years yet. So what should I do? They give me the money. I run away. But the dead moujik they telling everybody is me, which I am blew to pieces by the package." "And you let the old man bury the moujik and think it was you?" Morris asked. Harkavy nodded. "Over and over again he's telling me I'm no good. He wishes I was dead. I wish I was, Mr. Perlmutter. I wish I was." He commenced to cry weakly, and Morris handed him the water. "But when I hear last week the old man, my father's here," he continued, "I couldn't help myself. I'm hanging around Madison Street, trying I should get one look at him only. I didn't see him till just now." He struggled to raise himself from the lounge. "Let me go to him. Let me go." Abe looked inquiringly at the doctor, who nodded in reply. "Let him go. Happiness never harmed anybody yet." "Gentlemen," said the United States Commissioner, as he sat behind his shabby desk in the post office building, "the prisoner is in the marshal's office. Shall he be brought in?" He addressed his question to Mr. Munjoy, who was seated between Henry D. Feldman and Steuermann at one side of a huge table. Opposite them were the clerk of the Russian consulate and his counsel, who was obviously nervous at the formidable appearance presented by the lawyer Henry D. Feldman. The latter was about to pull off, as in his colloquial moments he himself would have expressed it, a rotten trick on his fellow counsel. For Abe and Mawruss had not informed either Mr. Munjoy or Mr. Steuermann of the stirring scene in their showroom that morning. Instead, they had called on Feldman, who, with the dramatic intuition of the effective jury lawyer, saw an opportunity for a coup that would at once gain the admiration and respect, if not the legal business, of Moses M. Steuermann, and procure Feldman a column and a half of publicity in next day's paper. Hence he had sworn Abe and Mawruss to secrecy in consideration of making no charges for his service, since he deemed the accruing benefit to be worth at least $200. "Shall he be brought in, gentlemen?" the commissioner asked. Counsel for the Russian consulate bowed, as did Mr. Munjoy, but Henry D. Feldman cleared his throat with a great rasping noise that penetrated to the corridor without. This was the signal, and Abe and Mawruss entered the room, supporting the old rabbi, who was followed by Pincus Levin. "One moment, sir," Feldman said. "I have a preliminary objection to make. Will you hear the offer, sir?" The commissioner nodded, and Steuermann and his counsel, Mr. Munjoy, turned to Feldman in amazement. "What's all this, Feldman?" Munjoy cried. Feldman waved his hand impressively. "My objection is, sir, that a gross fraud has been practiced on this court. It has come to my attention that somebody connected with this proceeding has furnished a material witness for the defense with a ticket for Chicago and 1,000 rubles as a bribe to stay away from the hearing." Counsel for the complainant jumped to his feet. "This is preposterous," he declared. "By no means," Feldman continued. "Will you direct counsel not to interrupt me, sir, if you please?" "I so direct," the commissioner replied, whereat Feldman again cleared his throat and coughed twice, and in answer to this cue, Yossel Levin, alias Joseph Harkavy, entered the room. "The person so bribed, Mr. Commissioner, is named in the petition as the corpus delicti of the crime alleged to have been committed," Feldman said. "What?" Munjoy and opposing counsel cried in unison, and the clerk to the consulate reached for his hat and started for the door. His counsel leapt after him, however, and succeeded in catching his coat tails just as he was about to disappear into the hall. With one hand still grasping the consular clerk, counsel for the complainant turned to the commissioner. "I think my client wants to consult me outside for 1 minute," he said. "Have I your consent to withdraw?" The commissioner nodded, and Munjoy turned to Feldman. "What the deuce are you trying to do, Feldman?" he asked, as complainant's counsel returned. "If the commissioner pleases," Feldman said, "we consent to a dismissal of the extradition proceedings and to a discharge of the prisoner." The imperturbable commissioner bowed and rose to his feet. "Submit the necessary papers for the prisoner's discharge, gentlemen," he said. "The hearing is closed." $5 for doing what that fella done is like picking it up off the street, Morris," Abe declared to Morris when they received the doctor's bill a month later. "How could we be small about it, Abe?" Morris rejoined. "Look at what Steuermann done. Not only is he paying his lawyers for getting this Kovalenko out of prison, but he's taking that young fella and paying for him he should go on with his studying for a doctor." "Well, the way the doctors soak you, Morris," Abe said, looking at the bill which he held in his hand, "it wouldn't be long before Kovalenko pays him back with interest, I bet you." "But anyhow, Abe," Morris continued, "now we got Yossel Levin working for us as a cutter. It'd be a better feeling all around supposing we pay the bill and say nothing about it." "I'm agreeable we should say nothing more about it, Morris," Abe retorted, "because we already wasted more time and trouble than the whole thing is worth. But one thing I would like you to know, Morris, before I shut my mouth, why did this here fella, Yossel Levin, call himself Harkavy?" "Say," Morris said, using 3 inflections to the monosyllable, "he's got just so much right to call himself Harkavy as all them other guys has to call themselves Breslauer, Hamburger, Leipziger, or the Berliner. He anyhow does come from Harkov, Abe. Which you would take it from me, Abe, there's many a fella calls himself Hamburger which he don't come from no nearer Hamburger than Vilna or Kovno." Abe shrugged his shoulders expressively in reply. "My worries where them fellas come from, Morris," he commented. "Because when it comes right down to it, Morris, if a fella attends to his own business, Morris, and don't monkey with politics, you understand, where could he make a better living than right here in New York, New York?" End of chapter 7. End of section 11.